joining me today. Today's talk is titled Equity in Language Assessment, Call for a Paradigm Shift. And I use the word paradigm quite deliberately because what we are discussing is not a minor reform or a technical tweak. It's a fundamental rethinking of how we assess English proficiency in a world where English is no longer one language, but many. Let me begin by walking you through the structure of today's talk. We'll start by asking why equity matters in language assessment, what's at stake, and who is affected. Then we'll examine how traditional tests perpetuate inequity, often unintentionally. We'll explore frameworks like World Englishes and concepts like Langlism that I coined personally, which help us name and challenge linguistic injustice. From there, we'll turn to the ethical foundations of assessment, the risks posed by AI, and the need to reframe proficiency itself. We'll look at inclusive practices, technology's role, and the shift from gatekeeping to empowerment. Finally, we'll discuss practical pathways forward and the tensions we must navigate. My goal is to leave you not just with ideas, but with tools and questions to take back to your own institutions. Okay, let's begin with the core question. Why equity? Why now? These are very important questions that we have before us. English has become a global language, not because of any inherent superiority, but because of historical, economic, and geopolitical forces. Today, it is spoken in hundreds of varieties across continents. Yet our assessment systems still privilege a narrow, idealized version of English, often modeled on native speaker norms from the UK or the US. And of course, it could be from Canada or New Zealand or even Australia. This creates a fundamental mismatch. Learners who use English effectively in their own contexts, whether in Nairobi, in Mumbai, or Manila, may be penalized for not sounding standard. Equity demands that we ask who benefits from these tests and who is excluded. These are critical questions that we have to ask if we think critically. Assessment should reflect the diversity of English users. It should illuminate learning, not police language. And it should empower learners, not marginalize them. That's the ethical imperative at the heart of this talk. So just wanted to prepare you for what we are going to talk about and what the core of my idea is. So here, the problem isn't just that traditional assessments are outdated. It's that they are inequitable by design. So I'm not talking about modernizing language assessment. I'm just fighting against inequalities in language assessment. Rubrics often center standard English, a construct that is both narrow and contested. Local forms, accents, idioms, and pragmatic norms are treated as errors. This penalizes learners not for failing to communicate, but for failing to conform to the standards designed by native speakers. Let me give you an example from Oman. A student might say in Omani Arabic, if I have picked it up correctly, بروح الحين, literally, I'll go now, to mean I'm heading out, or I'm on my way. In the local context, this is a perfectly natural and intelligible expression. But if the student translates it directly into English as I go now, it may be flagged as incorrect in a standardized test, even though the intended meaning is clear. I hope now you understand where I'm coming from. I'm focusing on communication. This isn't a failure of the student's communicative ability. It's a failure of the test to recognize pragmatic norms and contextual meaning. When assessments are blind to localized usage, they risk penalizing learners for being authentically expressive within their own linguistic reality. When assessments ignore identity, culture, and communicative norms, they become gatekeepers. They reinforce linguistic hierarchies and discourage authentic expression. And that's a profound equity issue that I'm trying to attack today. The framework of World Englishes offers powerful alternative. Pioneered by scholars like Braj Kachru, it recognizes that English is not a monolith. It is a family of languages shaped by local histories, cultures, and communicative needs. World Englishes validate diverse norms. They remind us that communicative success doesn't require conformity to a single standard that you call native speakers standard. A Nigerian engineer, for example, a Singaporean teacher, and a Jordanian entrepreneur may all use English differently and effectively. For assessment, this means shifting our focus from imitation to intelligibility, from correctness to context, from native-like performance to communicative effectiveness. Equity means recognizing that English belongs to its users, not just its historical gatekeepers, who happen to be native speakers again. To address inequity, we must name it. And one term that helps us to do that is Langlism, a term that I coined a while back. Langlism refers to linguistic discrimination rooted in privileged norms. It's the idea that certain ways of speaking English are seen as superior while others are marginalized. And it intersects with race, class, geography, and power. Langlism appears in grading, where students lose marks for non-standard forms. It appears in hiring, where accents are used to judge competence. You don't have a native speaker's accent? Okay, despite the fact that you are very clear, I understand you perfectly, you will be underprivileged, or you will be penalized, you will not be hired. It appears in publishing, where certain varieties are deemed less scholarly. Naming Langlism allows us to challenge it. It reminds us that language bias is not neutral, it's a structural. And equity begins with dismantling these structures. This brings us to what I call the equity turn in language assessment. It's inspired by Elana Shahami. Elana Shahami worked in critical language testing, which argues that tests are not just measurement tools, they are policy instruments. They shape who gets access and who gets validated and who gets excluded. Shahami's concept of multiplism is especially relevant. It suggests that there are multiple valid pathways to proficiency. So proficiency is not monolithical. Not everyone needs to sound like a BBC announcer to be considered competent. The equity turn reframes validity to include social impact. It asks not just, is this test reliable, but is this test just? That's a radical shift and a necessary one, I'm telling you. Now, let's talk about technology. specifically AI. Automated scoring systems are becoming more common, but they come with serious equity risks. Another bias can skew training data. If the annotators who label correct language come from a narrow demographic, the algorithm will learn those biases. Algorithmic scoring can replicate systemic inequities, especially if it penalizes non-standard forms or unfamiliar accents. So the presence of AI may not help us. As a matter of fact, those who program AI or train AI systems, if they are biased, then the system will be biased as well, and in a more negative way because it's more powerful. Equity requires ethical by design AI. That means transparent algorithms, human oversight, and continuous bias monitoring. It means asking who built this system, whose norms does it reflect, and who might it exclude? These are the questions that we have to ask. Technology should serve justice, not just efficiency. Let's take a moment to ground ourselves in 4 core ethical principles that should guide all language assessment practices. First, equity. This means fair treatment across all Englishes. Not just equal treatment, but equitable treatment. There is a difference between the two. In other words, we must recognize that learners come from different starting points with different linguistic resources, and our assessments must account for that diversity. Second, transparency. Learners deserve to know what's being assessed and why. Our criteria and rationale should be clear, accessible, and justifiable, not hidden behind opaque rubrics or unexplained scoring decisions. So transparency for the students is what we really need. Third is respect. Respect for the learner's identity, their background, and their voice. Assessment should not erase who they are. It should honor their linguistic reality, not force them to conform to someone else's. And finally, beneficence. Assessment should be a tool for support, not a mechanism of punishment. It should help learners grow, reflect, and improve, not simply sort, rank, or exclude them. These principles, equity, transparency, respect, and beneficence, are not abstract ideals, my friend. They are the ethical foundation of any assessment system that claims to be just. These principles are not optional. They are foundational to any assessment system that claims to be ethical. Okay. Let's look at how we define proficiency. Traditionally, it's been about accuracy, grammar, and native-like performance. But an equity-oriented approach shifts the focus. Let's take a moment to contrast traditional views of language proficiency with an equity-oriented perspective that I am advertising here. Traditionally, we have emphasized accuracy, the precise reproduction of standard forms. But from an equity standpoint, what truly matters is intelligibility. And by intelligibility, I mean asking the question, can the speaker be understood in their context? That is intelligibility. It doesn't need to be accurate. It needs to be understandable. Where traditional assessments focus on grammar as a set of prescriptive rules, An equity lens shifts our attention to communicative effectiveness. How well, and that is what I mean by communicative effectiveness, how well someone conveys meaning in real-world interactions. In other words, how much communication is effective. Instead of striving for native-like performance, which often privileges certain accents and cultural norms, we should value context-appropriate language use, language that fits the speaker's purpose, audience, and setting. And finally, rather than enforcing uniformity, equity celebrates diversity. And by that, I mean the rich range of Englishes that reflect global usage today. This reframing isn't about lowering standards, it's about aligning our assessments with the realities of English as a global, pluralistic language. This reframing matters. It changes how we design rubrics, how we train raters, and how we interpret scores. It moves us from correctness to connection, from imitation to empowerment. So, what does inclusive assessment actually look like in practice? First, it begins with localized rubrics, rubrics that value intelligibility and context rather than rigid adherence to a single standard. These rubrics ask, is the learner's message clear in their communicative environment? Does it make sense to their intended audience? This shift allows us to honor the diversity of Englishes rather than penalize it. Second, inclusive assessment incorporates peer and self-assessment. These practices foster learner agency and reflection. When students evaluate their own work or engage with their peers' performances, they begin to internalize criteria, recognize growth, and develop metacognitive awareness. It's not just about receiving a score, it's about understanding how and why that score came to be. Third, we need real-world tasks that mirror authentic use. That means moving beyond artificial prompts and instead assessing learners through emails, presentations, negotiations, interviews, tasks that reflect how English is actually used in their lives and futures. And finally, inclusive assessment prioritizes formative feedback over ranking. Now, what do I mean by formative feedback? This is the feedback. Our feedback should be constructive, should be specific and actionable. It should help learners build their skills, not simply tell them where they fall on a scale. That doesn't make any sense. What is the use of it? If our feedback is not actionable, that they can do something to improve it. In short, inclusive assessment is not just a pedagogical preference, it's an ethical obligation. It asks us to assess learners as they are in the contexts they inhabit and with the voices they bring. Inclusive assessment doesn't mean lowering standards, I reiterate. It means redefining them to reflect what matters. My friends, how we assess today is not what really matters. Can the learners communicate effectively in their context? That is what matters. Equity means assessing what learners can do, not what they lack. And unfortunately, this is what we do in our assessment. We just tell them what their mistakes are. We don't tell them what they have achieved. That is very discouraging. And that is not real assessment. So, as we integrate artificial intelligence into language assessment, we must be clear about this role. AI should be a partner, not a judge. That means, first and foremost, we need transparent, auditable algorithms. If a learner receives a score from an AI system, they and their educators should be able to understand how that score was generated. Black box systems that obscure their logic are incompatible with ethical assessment. Second, we should move toward human AI ensemble scoring. Ensemble mean collaborative scoring. This means combining the efficiency of AI with the contextual judgment of trained human raters. AI can support consistency and speed, but it cannot and should not replace human insight, especially when evaluating diverse language use. Third, we need ongoing bias monitoring. Bias isn't a one-time fix. It's a moving target. We must continuously audit our systems to ensure they are not replicating or amplifying existing inequities. And finally, we should invest in feedback tools that adapt to learner needs. AI has the potential to offer personalized, formative feedback at a scale. And by that, I mean feedback that helps learners grow, reflect, and improve. But again, this must be done with care, with transparency, and with a commitment to equity. In short, AI can be a powerful ally in assessment, but only if we design it to serve justice, not just efficiency. We must ask, does this tool empower learners? Does it reflect diverse norms? Does it serve justice? And if the answer is no, my friends, we need to redesign. Let's now consider how the very purpose of assessment shifts when viewed through an equity lens. In the old paradigm, assessment was primarily about selection, identifying who qualifies, who advances, and who is left behind. But in an equity paradigm that I am proposing here, maybe for the first time in the world, I'm not aware of that yet, assessment becomes a form of support. It is not about filtering learners out. It's about helping them move forward. Traditionally, we have focused on deficits, what learners lack and what they get wrong, where they fall short. But equity asks us to focus on growth, what learners are building, how they are progressing, and where they are headed. The old model often involved policing language. That's a verb I love to use very frequently. Enforcing rigid norms and penalizing deviation. The equity model shifts toward empowering learners, validating their voices, their contexts, and their communicative strategies. And finally, where traditional assessment has too often led to exclusion, dropping them out. Equity demands inclusion. It insists that all learners, regardless of their background, accent, or variety, deserve to be seen, heard, and supported. This is not just a philosophical shift, it's a practical one. It changes how we design tasks, train raters, interpret scores, and communicate results. It's a shift from gatekeeping to opportunity. Assessment should be a bridge, not a barrier. It should open doors to education, employment, and self-expression. It should scaffold opportunity, not enforce exclusion. This is the paradigm shift we need. Okay, so how do we move forward? What does it actually look like to build assessment systems that are equitable, inclusive, and responsive to the realities of global English use? First, we need to design authentic contextualized tasks. That means moving away from abstract prompts or decontextualized grammar drills, and instead creating assessments that reflect how English is used in real life, whether it is writing an email, participating in a group discussion, or presenting a proposal. Tasks should mirror the communicative demands learners actually face. Context matters, not just for fairness, but for validity. And we must use transparent rubrics and bias-aware raters. The raters who refer to the rubric must be aware about they might be biased in their assessment. Rubrics should clearly articulate what's being assessed and why. They should prioritize intelligibility, communicative effectiveness, I've already talked about, and context appropriateness, not just surface level correctness. Raters must be trained to recognize their own biases, especially when it comes to accent, register, or unfamiliar discourse patterns. Equity begins with awareness. Okay. Third, we should build modular adaptive testing systems. Not every learner needs to demonstrate the same skills in the same way. Adaptive systems can tailor tasks to learner profiles, allowing for multiple valid pathways to demonstrate proficiency. Modularity also allows for more targeted feedback and more flexible certification. So there is not one way to answering a question. And finally, we must engage stakeholders, teachers, learners, administrators, and communities, Assessment should not be something done to learners, but something done with them. Co-designing assessments with those most affected by them ensures greater relevance, fairness, and buy-in. In short, moving forward requires more than technical innovation. It requires ethical imagination. It requires us to ask, what kind of assessment culture are we building? And who does it serve? As we move toward more equitable language assessment, we must also acknowledge the challenges and tensions that come with this shift. These are not minor obstacles. They are structural, philosophical, and practical. First, there is a tension between reliability and flexibility. Traditional assessments prize reliability. And by reliability, I mean consistency across raters, tasks, and contexts. But equity demands flexibility, and it is a room for diverse responses, localized norms, and context-sensitive judgments. Balancing these two is difficult. If we lean too far into reliability, we'll risk flattening diversity. If we lean too far into flexibility, we must compromise comparability. The solution isn't opposing one or following one over the other. It's designing systems that hold both. Second, we face resource and scalability constraints. Inclusive assessment often requires more time, more training, and more nuanced tools. Peer assessment, formative feedback, adaptive testing, these are labor intensive. Institutions may struggle to implement them at scale, especially in high-stakes environments. But equity cannot be reserved for elite contexts. We must find ways to make inclusive practices scalable, sustainable, and accessible. Third, there is resistance from entrenched stakeholders. Standardized testing like IELTS, TOEFL is a billion-dollar industry. It's deeply embedded in admissions, hiring, immigration, and credentialing. Changing these systems means challenging powerful interests. It also means confronting deeply held beliefs about what good English looks like. This resistance is real, and we must be prepared to engage it with evidence, ethics, and empathy. Fourth, we must be vigilant about the risk of new biases in so-called inclusive systems. Just because a rubric claims to value diversity doesn't mean it does so in practice. Bias can creep in through task design, radar training, algorithmic scoring, or institutional culture. Equity is not a checkbox. It's a continuous process of reflection, revision, and accountability. In short, equity in assessment is not easy. It's not quick. It's not universally welcomed, unfortunately, but it is necessary. These tensions are not reasons to retreat. They are reasons to proceed thoughtfully, collaboratively, and of course, courageously. Let me end today's talk with a vision and a call to action. We must move beyond correctness toward connection, because language is not just a system of rules, it's a medium of relationship. When we assess English, we are not just measuring grammar, we are measuring the ability to build bridges across differences. We must move beyond accuracy toward understanding. Accuracy has its place, yes, but it must never come at the expense of meaning. A learner who communicates clearly, even if imperfectly, is demonstrating proficiency, and our assessments must be able to recognize that. We must move beyond testing toward equity and empowerment. Testing is not neutral. It shapes futures. It opens or closes doors. And that means we have a responsibility to ensure that our assessments are not just technically sound, but ethically grounded. Equity in language assessment is not a trend. It's not a buzzword. It's a commitment to fairness, to inclusion, and to justice. It's a recognition that English belongs to its users, not just its gatekeepers. So I invite you, whether you are a teacher, a researcher, a policymaker, or a technologist, to join this paradigm shift, to rethink your rubrics, to challenge your assumptions, to listen to your learners, please. Because when we assess with equity, we don't just measure language, we affirm humanity. Thank you so much for listening to me this afternoon, and I appreciate your time, your attention, and engagement today. I'm deeply grateful to be part of a community that is willing to interrogate the assumptions behind our assessment practices and work toward more equitable, inclusive models. Okay, I'd now like to open the floor for questions, whether you would like to challenge an idea, share a perspective, or ask about implementation. I welcome the dialogue. Let's continue this conversation together. Thank you again.
Thank you, Doctor. Just waiting for the participants. If anyone have any questions, please feel free to write it on the chat.
Okay.
And then I have my own questions as well.
Okay, no worries.
I think Samita is typing. So, Doctor, I will start with my own question.
Okay.
Now, as a teachers, and as a human, actually, we tend to have that assumption of everything around us. So while designing the rubrics, we tend to have that assumption of certain levels, certain criteria, and the same goes with grading. I mean, with equity, how can we avoid that thing of assessing the student without with separating our own assumption of a certain level, and the same goes with designing the rubric. I mean, how can we make sure that
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's a very good question, I have to say. The problem is the first thing that we need to do is that we should not look at some already made rubrics and assume them to be perfect. That is, I've seen so many teachers do it. They just look at the IELTS. For example, they want to write a rubric for writing. They look at the IELTS one. So the IELTS, they have, it's just like half a score. One of them is lexical resources. It means vocabulary, and then the details about vocabulary, and then grammatical accuracy. You see, and we have cohesion and coherence, and you don't have anything about meaning. And then we have task response. If you look at the IELTS exam rubrics for writing and even for speaking, you see that fluency is very important. And then not using phrasal verbs in the speaking, but not in writing. All these things, petty details, they are all aspects of accuracy. We have to rewrite our rubrics. That is the meaning of a paradigm shift. We are focusing on communication, how efficiently I can understand when I read this. I do not pay attention to spelling. Now we have AI, we have Grammarly. Why should I care about the spelling? Why should I care about punctuation? If punctuation affects my understanding, yes. When the meaning is affected, yes, I will include that. Because the ultimate purpose of language use is communication. So we have to redraft our rubrics based on context, based on audience. That is, this piece of writing is written for whom? So if it is written an email to your friend and is too formal, then we may question that. We say that, well, you have to consider your audience. But I do not pay attention to, like my students said, I did a mistake. I say, oh, no, I made a mistake. That they don't collocate. I mean, I don't care if they don't collocate. You understood me. I mean, in the adult world, I think maybe it's because of or they say that, do you want me to open the AC? I say, no, we have to turn on the AC. I think it's the interference of Arabic. I say,
and
no,
these are very common mistakes with the students.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter at all.
Exactly.
They understand. That's in their culture. They say that, This is very important. I mean, you just make them into the loopholes that they are not able to learn new vocabulary. They are not able to learn different new ways of using language to communicate because you just involve them in these petty details which are not important in communication at all. This is what I mean by paradigm shift, right? And this is, if you have that mindset, you can develop your own rubric, of course.
Thank you, Doctor. I think there is another question here.
Yes.
From Sumita. Yeah, she says, what are challenges in the transition from monolingual to multilingual classroom instruction? How can we address such changes?
Yeah. Somebody said OpenAC is a good example.
Exactly.
So I don't know why we should care. I mean, I understand. Communication has taken place. That's fine. I'm happy. I understood you. You understand me. That's it. Right? I mean, it's very hard. I think I told you, that is a business. I mean, if we just focus on accuracy, I mean, that's the right tense. That is not the right tense. I gave you that Arabic sentence in Oman. I don't know. That was
Yes,
it.
yeah, that was correct. Yes.
Was that correct? I mean,
Yes, it
that is
was.
what I heard while teaching
Yeah.
in Oman. And then, so why should I say, I mean, that is a translation of your Arabic language, or that is your culture, and it's perfectly fine. Why should I bother? I can understand. So finding faults, how much discouraging it is? How
Exactly.
much, I mean, they say, oh no, language is so difficult. I mean, that is exclusion. And that is what I mean by inclusive assessment in my talk. That inclusive assessment means, no, you come over here. No, you can communicate. I understand you perfectly. I'm not going to penalize you for that wrong form of language. But the question raised, you mentioned that about the challenges in monolingual. I didn't get the question very well, actually. I wish I could get an elaboration on the question. So monolingual to error correction. Yeah. No, we do not correct errors. No, it depends on the error. I mean, even if when we want to correct errors, we have to do it indirectly. No, you don't open the AC, you turn on the AC. No, we never correct like that. I mean, in the first place, that correction is not required at all. We do not make corrections of that sort. But if something is harming communication, that is, I do not understand you. You say something or you write something I don't understand, or I'm confused, then that is the place that correction must take place. And of course, the best form of correction is self-assessment and peer assessment. That is, I ask a question, what do you think your sentence, what do you think your sentence is communicating? So how can you rephrase it so that I can understand you much better? So you do not correct yourself, but you provide the learners with the opportunity to self-correct. Because when you self-correct, you learn better, right? So, okay. Oh, monolingual means the media of instruction is only English. Okay. Yeah, you mean ESL context, EFL context. Oh, okay. Now, when the medium of instruction is English, yeah, even so, of course, it's more challenging because there are some aspects we are not aware of that. I believe that a language learner should be familiar with the native language of the learners. But still, if you're not aware of that, you can understand him, that's just fine. If you cannot understand him, then you can ask questions. You can learn from. Don't forget that learning language is a mutual activity. That is, you are collaborating. It's not one way. That is a traditional perspective of language learning, that we are the teachers and we are transferring knowledge and learners are recipients of the knowledge. No, it's collaborative. Actually, we are negotiating meaning. And that is the meaning of mutual intelligibility. We try to understand them. They try to understand us, and then we collaborate. So, yeah, when we are, the good thing if we are bilingual, I personally prefer that. I always personally preferred bilingual teachers, those who speak the mother tongue of the learners as well. They are able to predict, they know the culture, they are able to predict the errors made, and they understand that that is a part of the culture and that they can say it. I don't know, hiring, I would, if I were responsible for the dean or the president of college or university, I would never, ever hire native speakers.
That's some would disagree with you, doctor. But
No,
yeah,
that's okay. No, I would maybe
I do
that's
agree
what
with you.
maybe I'm a very end of the continuum. But you know what they do in South Korea? They invited me to pay a visit to one of their educational institutions, and they had both native speaker and non-native speaker teachers, South Korean teachers and American native speakers. They were acting as language model, and they were, the non-native speaker teachers were acting as learner model. But now, with the notion of the paradigm shift, the language model is not that much necessary. You know what I mean? Because accent, pronunciation, because we just hire them for accent, for pronunciation, for, culture, for collocation, or the precision of vocabulary use. So that is the way we say the things. Now, in the new model, then we are talking about equity, we are talking about inclusion, then that one is not really necessary. I mean,
exactly.
Especially native speakers who have no experience of learning a second language. I mean, they don't speak, or they have never learned another language.
Exactly. So, sometimes they make very big grammar mistakes or something that, although they are native speakers, but they don't.
And sometimes they fall into what I call the illusion of simplicity. Illusion of simplicity is one of the problems of some teachers. They think that, oh, it's easy, come on. Especially if you're a native speaker, it's because that's your mother tongue. You just assume that it is easy. So you do not elaborate. You do not tolerate. Exactly. You're not patient enough to, come across students who are not able to communicate the way that you like, or some native speakers are like that. They say, I don't say it. So I'm sorry, I don't care you don't say it. I mean, I say it, and people understand me.
Exactly.
And again, there are disagreements among native speakers. I'm sorry. I mean, some of them say, I say that. I say, no, I don't say that. I mean, I asked two native speakers who say, do you say you turn me down or you let me down? And he said, I never say you turn me down. I always say you let me down. Exactly. I said, I'm sorry. I mean, other native speakers say, no, you turn me down. And, even there are disagreements among them because they're from different regions.
Exactly.
And we have Indian English, Singaporean English, Filipino or Philippinian English. These are all world Englishes. And people can communicate. They say, you should not say postponement because it doesn't exist in English. That is very funny. I mean, it exists in Indian English, postponement. And it's very nice. We don't have the noun form of postpone in English. So Indians created it. And it is just fine because it serves its purpose.
Exactly. I can see another question Ms. Shoq is asking. In what specific ways can we shift from a traditional occurrency-focused approach to an equity-oriented one that prioritizes intelligibility and communicative effectiveness? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, you have to change the mindset first because we have all been trained. We are imprisoned in our past learning because we have role models, and what we do actually, we imitate our teachers. I mean, something that we learned in the past. I mean, we have to learn to change, and then we have to wash our eyes, and we have to see, we have to change our lenses, in other words, and then we have to educate ourselves. That is, we can use AI as well. So you can write a prompt. I don't mind. You can write a prompt for Copilot, for Gemini, for ChatGPT, if you like. I mean, when you want to assess something, I say, I'm sorry, I want to to see how much effective this communication is. I mean, if you want to assess, so because there are some parameters. The parameters are, now you're asking, are context, aspects of context. By context, I mean people, situation, and time. So it makes sense at this particular time and at this particular place and with this particular person. So do you comprehend in this context or not? Then this is acceptable, effective communication. Okay. We look at another parameter is the learner's culture. Is it acceptable in the learner's culture? Is it acceptable in the learner's, now I go to Qatar and I see that people go and they want to order in McDonald's. They say, give me a hamburger. And then there was an American guy there and he said, may I get a hamburger, please? Okay. Come on. In that culture, give me a hamburger is give me a hamburger. Maybe it's translation from error. That's a culture aspect.
Exactly.
I'm not allowed. Oh, it's not polite. I'm sorry. That's not polite in your culture. In this culture is okay. Give me a hamburger. Right? So you have no right to correct people. They are learning language. They are not learning a new identity.
Exactly. And it could be polite in their own language, as you said.
I mean, in their own language, I mean, that context, of course, yes. That's a polite request. I understand. But that native speaker, that learner does not think that in that context, she needs to be polite. So we teach polite requests. We say, this is the polite request, but it's up to you based on the context to decide if this is what you want to use. I can't correct the person at that moment.
Exactly. And let's end with the last question with Mr. Mohammed. He asked, what is the most reliable tools that can assist teachers to achieve high level of equity in assessment? If you can recommend.
Sorry, ask a question again because there was a pop-up.
What is the most reliable tools that can assist teachers to achieve high level of equity in assessment?
To assess teachers?
Kind of, yeah. Yes, it is. I will just copy the question again.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if it appears now.
Oh, to assist teachers, not to assess. I heard. Okay.
Yeah.
So to assist teachers?
Yes.
To focus on equity.
Yeah, to help. I guess to help teachers to achieve high level of equity in assessment.
Yeah, for the high level of equity in assessment. Yeah. To achieve the high level of equity in assessment, there are some parameters I discuss in this talk. And then the talk is available. One of them is you have to change your mindset. You should not focus on accuracy. Try to not imitate, try to be creative. The tools can be AI, but AI is at your service. So use AI, write the correct prompts. So say, I wanna assess based on the notion of equity in assessment, inclusiveness. So if you want to draft rubric, the question is too broad. I have to make it more specific. You want to assess writing, you want to assess speaking, because in writing, you should not pay attention. I told you, do not pay attention to, unlike Grammarly and stuff, You want to assess the speaking, then you should not pay attention to pronunciation as long as you're able to understand it. If you want to hire people, then you want to assess people. Wow, she had a beautiful accent, so I hired her, but she doesn't know anything.
Exactly.
Yes, Sefer.
I think
Yes, Sefer is good. They are working on it. The notion of equity is still not there, I'm telling you. Neither in language proficiency tests, unfortunately, Sefer and stuff. This is actually a new movement. Yeah, coming from critical language testing.
exactly. Okay, I think that is the end of our session. I would
So
like to
yeah,
thank
the audience can communicate with me. I gave you my email address, my LinkedIn. They can connect on LinkedIn. I write many articles on LinkedIn. They can interact, and if I have specific questions or they want to collaborate, maybe they want to develop tests. And also, I am one of the trustees of English Language Testing Society, eltsociety.org. You can be a member. I think the first few months is free, so you can join us. I write the newsletter, and yeah, you can join English Language Testing Society for updates, webinars, seminars, and even you can present, you can participate. I think the first 6 months, I can't remember, or 3 months, you can join us, and if you like, you can continue. And okay, that was like a commercial, a promotion for for
and
ELT
I
societies.
will also share your accounts
Oh,
and all
oh,
the
okay.
details email
Yes, it is
to
based in the
participate.
US. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor,
Okay.
and thank you for the participant for
Sure.
joining us today.
My pleasure.
Especially thanks to you for accepting this invitation, for your
Sure.
time, and for sharing such valuable insights.
Thank you. Thank you
Uh,
for having me. Okay. Sure.
Yeah. And thank you for those who have participated in the chat. I hope that today's session gave you a useful perspective on how to promote fairness and equity in language assessment, and also to take it into your own context. Of course, if you have any additional questions or if you required any further resources, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will share the doctor's email and his account to you. Thank you again for your time and for your participation. Wishing you all a wonderful day ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone. You too. Have a good one.